All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So hello everyone and welcome to the next part of the Office of Accessibility Services series, Spring into Success. So we're excited to bring this particular program to you because there's going to be, we know that we're in the midst of a lot of different things going on right now. But we know that a lot of you all are still taking the opportunity to look into what you have in store for after the spring semester. So many of you all might be jumping into your last year here at FSU, or many of you might be jumping into a different graduate school or something like that. And so we want to give you all the time to just kind of explore options and take a look at what might be some really good tips and tools to help you in that transition to grad school, in that trend, and also while you're in grad school. And so we're excited to have a couple different people on today. So our first guest is Emily Kinley, who is from the Career Center at FSU. And Emily's going to give us, in a little bit, we'll go through a lot of the different resources and tips, tools, suggestions, information that the Career Center has on graduate school and graduate school success. So we're going to have a little bit of that. And then we're going to jump into a large group panel of some graduate students that are currently here at FSU. And that's going to be your opportunity to ask any questions. It's going to be moderated a little bit. So we're going to have an opportunity to ask them some questions. And then there will be an opportunity for you all to ask specific questions that you may have. So you will have an opportunity to do that through Zoom. So we'll go through kind of the logistics of that at that point in time. But we want to make sure that this is an opportunity for you to get the answers that you need. And so at any point in time, please feel free to chat, in the chat box in Zoom. In Zoom, we encourage you to use the chat box to jump in and share a little bit about a question, or you can come directly off mute and ask the question yourself if you'd like that. So, and with that being said, I'm gonna hand the program over to Emily. So thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Spencer. Thank you all for having me and inviting me. I'm sorry, I've got like a weird light coming through my window right now. I'm sure everyone is getting used to using Zoom and being on Zoom meetings. But as Spencer mentioned, I work at the FSU Career Center, and I am the Career Center's liaison to the Office of Accessibility Services. So as your liaison, I wanted to kind of meet you all and share information about going to graduate school. So feel free as we go along, we'll kind of check the chat box, and as Spencer said, you can unmute yourself. If you're brave and you want to unmute your video too, that's fine with me. I'd love to see everyone. But just to start, I'm actually going to share in the chat box a file with everyone that you can download. It is a graduate program. Let's see, find it on my computer, graduate program exploration sheet. So I just sent it through. You should all be able to open that and download it. It's a fillable form, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as well so that it can show you all of the resources that I would recommend for researching graduate program if you're thinking about going to graduate school. but you can use that form to start to keep track of the programs that you're thinking about and all of the different requirements for those different programs. So I'm really curious, and if you want to add in the chat box, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And you all can unmute yourselves, but I always like to ask the question to the group as to why you are interested in going to graduate school, and you know, what those long-term goals might be. So go ahead, you can start kind of typing those different reasons in your chat, but why are you interested in going to graduate school? So to share a little bit about myself, I've been here at FSU since 2003. I have my bachelor's degree in rehabilitation counseling, and you'll see there's a gap in between the time that I completed my undergraduate and when I went to graduate school. So I took a little bit of time off, almost 3 years. I worked here in town at Ability First. It's a center for independent living, and really took some time to just work and figure out my professional self until I decided that going back to graduate school was something of interest. So it took me a little bit of time. Some students know right away that they would like to go to graduate school. Others might take that gap year, and taking that gap year is totally fine. When I decided to come back to grad school, I came to FSU again. So I have 3 degrees from FSU. I can't seem to get rid of me. And I did my graduate program in counseling and my specialization in career counseling, hence why I have been working at the Career Center for almost 11 years now. So in terms of reasons of like why you might be interested in going to graduate school, I think it's most important that you reflect on you know, why you are interested, as opposed to maybe why someone else might want you to go to graduate school. Maybe you feel like you need to advance your degree for whatever occupation that you're considering. So I know for myself, at some point, I needed an advanced degree for higher pay in my field, and to be able to get the certifications that I wanted. So that might be a reason. You might just be interested in learning more about your academic interest area. And so that might be a reason that you would go to graduate school. And for those of you who really like higher education, you might be thinking of a doctorate degree, so a PhD in academia. So considering your reasons for graduate school, I know when I graduated, it was 2007. So if anyone remembers, that was the kind of housing market crash, and a lot of students were going to graduate school. So as Spencer mentioned, in our changing economy right now and changing job market, I wouldn't be surprised if we see an increase in students applying to graduate school, and maybe taking advantage of that opportunity to go to graduate school and advance their careers. I think some of the reasons why you might want to avoid going is if you just feel like, I don't have anything else to do, I'm not really even sure what I would do with my bachelor's degree. I've heard that before. The Career Center can definitely help you explore options for working students, say, with just a bachelor's degree, but I feel like a bachelor's degree is extremely valuable and important. Or if you're just afraid of getting that first real job, we can walk you through and help you with that process if you're feeling like you aren't ready for graduate school. Most importantly is thinking about yourself. So knowing kind of what are your values, your interests, your skills, how do those relate to graduate programs? And then kind of diving in and really looking at what are the types of degrees. So what's like a master's degree versus an educational specialist versus PhD. So it takes some research on your part and a lot of planning. So I'll talk about the application application process and what that looks like. Sometimes I have students come into the Career Center who really want to apply to graduate school but have missed all of the deadlines. So there's a lot of time needed to prepare your application for graduate school, to research what your options are, and then to get the personal statements and applications together to be able to apply. So what to research? In thinking about a graduate program, these are some of the, just like you would research an employer before you go to work with an employer, you want to research the graduate program and make sure that, that it's a good fit for you. So looking at what is the culture of the program? Does that culture fit your values, what you're interested in? What's the focus area? So if you really want to do a particular type of research, do they have faculty in that program who can help you with that research, or distinguished faculty who can help you learn in your graduate program? Thinking about location could be a big one. So if you're looking out of state, that could have a higher cost as opposed to in-state, just like undergraduate. So location, housing, the just cost, and we'll give you some resources for funding graduate school too. And then accreditation. So this is a big one that I don't know that all students consider, but some of the programs that you might be interested in will require a certification at the end. And if you aren't graduating from an accredited graduate program, that could cause some just barriers for you. So looking at accreditation as well. So looking at some of the questions, and I saw the caption. I'm not sure if Spencer, you know that, to put captions on.
Yeah, I do. So captions involves us getting a captionist onto the program. So we usually request 24 to 48 hours notice for that.
Gotcha.
But this program will be closed captioned. So we're recording it. It's going to be
In the
closed
recording.
captioned in the recording. So I'm directing, anyone that has interest in getting this information can certainly get it in the recording.
Perfect. So when is it best to complete your application and apply to a graduate degree program? Great question. So I'm going to show you a timeline here. We'll kind of hop into the process, but typically, not every graduate program, but a lot of graduate programs will start in the fall. And so a fall semester start means that most of the time you have to have your application in by December prior to that fall. Some applications will accept candidates up until about this time, so like March or April. So some programs you could apply to now and actually start in the fall. But a lot of them are going to have that December 1 deadline. And then they'll spend kind of January, February making their decisions. And you will have the time to kind of look at assistantships. That's another thing that when you're researching graduate programs, I would look at, do they have assistantships? For myself, I did an assistantship in the Career Center that waived a portion of my tuition. which was huge in being able to, attend graduate school, and also gave me some pay while I was a graduate student. If you've missed a deadline though, I always recommend to still reach out to that program director. I, in full disclosure, missed the deadline for my graduate program. And when I reached out to the graduate program director and explained my background and my interest in the program, she told me to go ahead and apply anyway and got me into the program. So you never know with the grad program that you're applying to, like how many people are already, how many students have already been accepted, or if they need more students to be accepted. So it never hurts to reach out and just ask. They might say, nope, we're full, apply next December, or they might say, actually, yeah, we're still needing to fill some seats. So great question. With that application kind of process, you will have an application, you will have typically admission test scores, so like GRE, GMAT, MCAT, that have their own set of deadlines that you need to follow and keep track of to make sure that you're taking the test within time to provide those results to the schools that you're applying to. You'll typically submit official transcripts, a resume or CV, which the Career Center can help you with, sometimes a writing sample, and a personal statement, which we can also help with, and recommendations. So all of this information, and a recommendation could take a recommender a couple of weeks to write for you. So you want to provide plenty of time to your recommenders to write that recommendation. And so really that planning, if you're thinking that you want to start, graduate, usually it's your junior year that you really want to start to think about graduate school and start planning for it. Senior year, you can still do it. Just keep in mind that you're going to have a lot of deadlines to just kind of keep track of. There's also an interview that usually happens in the graduate school process. And so we have lots of interviewing resources that you can use. Big Interview, we have a mock interview program, but you're typically going to have a site visit. You want to go to the campus, you want to see the facilities, meet the faculty before you make your decision, just like you may have done with undergrad, coming to preview, orientation. That's all a part of making sure that it's a good fit for you. We also recommend applying to several graduate programs. Unless you have one that you're like, that's the only one that I want to go to and I'm not going to do anything else. We recommend applying to a couple so that you have, your options open, and hopefully you get a couple that you're accepted to, and then you can make that decision of which program you would like to join. Let's see. So I sent you, of course, we have like an action plan that you can use, but what I sent you all in the chat is what I would probably start with, is just narrowing down which programs you're interested in, and then doing some research. So my favorite website for that is petersons.com. And in Petersons, you can change this to grad school. You can search by keyword. I'm just gonna say psychology, kind of see what comes up. And filter out your results. Maybe I want a master's degree. I want anything in that range, school size. Maybe I want to go somewhere similar to FSU. And oops, I put way too many on there. And then it'll give you links to the programs so that you can kind of click on and start to do your research. I really like Peterson's for their grad search. They also have a scholarship search and test prep information. So if you've never taken like a sample GRE or MCAT, doing some test prep and some samples in there. FSU has some free sample tests that you can do through the library. So Peterson's is one of my favorites. And then gradschools.com, pretty easy name to remember. You can also browse by major, master's, PhD, online programs, and kind of start your research that way. So those are my two top resources that I would recommend for doing your research and using to fill out that worksheet. The attachment is at the top of this chat, and I can also email it to Spencer afterwards if that would be helpful. But it's like kind of right at the top there.
So what I will also say is all of this information, including the recording that'll be closed captioned, that is all going to be, well, one, this will be on our YouTube channel, but it'll also be on our web page. So under the programs and events page on our web page, there's a list of information on the different programs we're doing. And part of that will be the links to the recording as well as any resources that we can offer, or any resources that we've brought up through this. So you want to make sure that that's kind of the central hub for all of that. So it'll all be there, and I'll post the link to that website in the chat as well. So
great. So one last page that pretty much has everything is if you go to the Career Center's website, career.fsu.edu, and under students, we have an entire section for considering graduate school. And so in this section, we have our career guides, we have an extensive applying to graduate school timeline that you can follow. It was like a checklist. We have a writing a personal statement guide, finding and using graduate resources. We have some of those links plus more for researching programs and schools. So there's some other ones on here that I didn't have a chance to highlight. Can't highlight them all. And resources for mentoring. I know you all are going to hear from students who are graduate students and who have gone through that process. FSU has a graduate student ambassadors program of current grad students who are interested in mentoring undergrads to apply to graduate school. And then the Career Center has professional mentors, and you can search the topic applying to grad school. So you could be mentored by someone who's already gone through that process. And then an entire section on financing. I know for me, that was one of the biggest kind of draws. As a first generation student, I was like, bachelor's degree, that's all I need. Like, that was a great achievement. I don't know that I can fund anything more. And it wasn't until I spent some time looking at like funding options and assistantships that I realized this is a possibility and I could do it. So definitely check out these just like financial resources for funding grad school. Test prep, this is the link to the library's free test prep. And yeah, it's pretty much all on the site right here. Well, I know my time is probably running up so that we can get to everyone, but just wanted to see if there were any quick, maybe like specific questions for me.
And you can feel free to come off mute or type them in the chat if you'd like to.
We also have for fall, hopefully we will all be back on campus. And we do a grad school boot camp each fall. It's like a day-long conference where we have presentations like this one, more graduate panels, funding panels. So if right now you're like, I'm not quite ready to do this, definitely check out the grad school boot camp in the fall.
Well, Emily, I want to thank you so much for jumping on and giving us a lot of this information. I think all of this is really important for students to have. We know the Career Center is really the go-to source for getting information on graduate school and kind of where to start. And so we're so thankful for you to be on and for the resources that you provide to our students.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, before we jump into our next section, I did want to take a quick moment and I want to share a little bit about the accommodations process for different entrance exams. So I know many of you all have had questions about what exactly that looks like. And so I want to take a moment to show you some information on that. So the really important thing for you to understand when it comes to accommodations for different graduate prep program opportunities and whatnot, or different graduate entrance exams, is the characteristics for what you're going to need and the processes that you go through are completely different based off the type of exam. So I have 4 specific ones here that you may be somewhat familiar with. The most common is the GRE. And really the most important thing with the GRE is this bulletin supplement for test takers with disabilities or health-related needs. This is going to give you all of that information on on getting accommodations on the GRE. Really, the important thing with this one is that there is a part 3 to the document that we have to fill out, that someone in our office would fill out. And so you would want to reach out to your disability specialist, in this case, to get specific guidance and to get them to fill out part 3 for the GRE. Now there's the type of accommodations that you can get on the GRE may vary depending on the documentation that you have. Really, another important point with all of these is most of the documentation guidelines indicate that your documentation cannot be older than 5 years, which is different compared to maybe what you're used to with our documentation guidelines at FSU. And so I think it's really important to note that if you're looking towards taking the GRE or whatnot, check your documentation. Do a little bit of work in advance to see if you're going to have to get new documentation. I always share with students, consult with us first. You know, we're not going to be able to tell you whether you have to or not, but we're going to be able to tell you how old your documentation is, you know, what students have had success with in the past, what they haven't had success with. We can't ever make guarantees on what a testing agency is going to do, but we offer that as an option. So that consultation, I think, is really important. So that's the GRE. As a FYI, the GRE is also, from my understanding, offering testing at home as an option too. So Andres, yes, I will share with you that we do have copies of your old documentation. Depending on the situation. So when we moved to AIM and the new student portal, none of that old documentation moved over. So we still likely have copies of it, but if you right now, I think we are, we usually keep documentation for about 7 years now. So if you've been here for more than 7 years, we might have some difficulty finding that. But generally, we are going to have your old documentation on file. So that's GRE. Another one is LSAT. So and really, these websites are easy to find. We'll certainly post them, but I mean, if you Google the name of the test and accommodations, it's usually the first link on that Google page. Now, the important thing with LSAT is that in a lot of cases, LSAT, we're not going to, our office, OAS, isn't going to have to fill something out. Now, we have in the past, and we certainly have the opportunity to do so, but usually LSAT is going to rely on something from a medical professional of some kind or the person that initially diagnosed you. So, but we do have the option to fill out a form and whatnot from our office indicating your history of accommodations and whatnot. And so keep that in mind if you're taking the LSAT. And you really want to pay attention to the LSAT is a little more complicated in terms of it breaks it down into what you need to fill out based off of the different accommodations that you're requesting. So you really want to pay attention to that. So then MCAT, just as a FYI, MCAT, you are going to, there is nothing that our office fills out ever to do to help you with getting accommodations on MCAT. So it's strictly through the person that diagnosed you or that has indicated your disability and has the credentials to do so. So that's an important thing to note. You know, but again, there are accommodations on the MCAT, and you want to make sure that you fill those out. And then GMAT, it depends on the situation, but usually GMAT is, if you're taking the GMAT, they are looking for specific aspects of documentation. So usually you might submit your documentation in that case instead of something from us. So before we move forward, I wanted to ask if there were any specific questions, concerns, anything else related to accommodations on tests like the GRE. Okay. Keep in mind that you can always consult with OAS if you have any questions on those and whatnot. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and jump into the next part of our program. So let me stop sharing. Awesome. And so I want to welcome our panel of graduate students.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Awesome.
I want to welcome our panel of graduate students that are currently registered with our office and that have a lot to offer you all in terms of guidance, assistance, help of some kind. And so if we want to start, I think there's 5 of us on the call. Marshall, Joseph, Harry, Ellen, Sarah, and Matt. So if you can, you know, just popcorn style, if one of you all wants to start and just briefly introduce yourselves and maybe your particular academic area or, you know, your degree program, anything else that you feel impertinent to introduce yourself.
Sure. I guess I can go first. My name is Joseph Horacek. I am a PhD student in the biological science program. I guess the concentration, I guess you could call it, is ecology and evolution. I study marine meiofauna, so they're microscopic organisms that live in the sediment, and I study their ecology and their evolution. And I guess other relevant things. I have a master's degree in biology. I think that's about it for me.
I'll go next. My name is Ellen Cecil Lincoln. I'm finishing up my PhD in rhetoric and composition, which is in the English department. I just defended my dissertation on Monday, so I'm technically done with the program. I've done a master's as well in the English department, also in rhetoric and composition. My area of specialty is collaboration and making collaborative writing assignments more accessible for students with disabilities. So yeah.
I'm Sarah Wood, and I study psychology, particularly dyslexia and reading. So I'm also dyslexic, but I have a background in biology, but I basically realized that literacy skills were fundamental to study sciences. So I wanted to learn more about literacy skills. So here I am getting a PhD.
So I'm Marshall Thompson. I'm getting my PhD in the philosophy department, where I study ethics, broadly speaking. And I got my MA from the philosophy department on my way through the PhD program.
Hi there, my name is Matt Daly. I am in the Social Sciences and Public Policy department. I'm studying applied American politics and policy, and my emphases are in grassroots organizing and civil rights.
Awesome. Am I missing anyone? I want to make sure we had all of our panelists that were able to jump on. So awesome. Okay. So without further ado, we have a couple kind of guiding questions that we first wanted to ask you all. And then we're going to jump into any Q&A, so if students would like have various questions. And you can, the students can feel free to ask away and whatnot at that point in time. So, but I'm curious, how did you all first know that graduate school or pursuing additional studies beyond your first degree was the right decision for you?
For me, I feel like I always wanted a PhD because I always wanted to be a scientist or a biologist from a young age. So it was always, I feel like at least a master's degree. That was kind of the reason I went to college in the first place. So that was kind of my, when I decided. I feel like the question is more geared towards disability. But I guess, I don't know, anybody else?
So for me, I didn't have any idea that I was going to go on to graduate school when I went into my undergraduate program. I started thinking about graduate school when I started working in the writing center at my undergraduate institution. And while I was there, I realized that I really enjoyed teaching students about writing and helping them improve their writing. So when I talked to the director of the writing center there and told him what I wanted to do was continue teaching college writers, he told me that what I should pursue was a graduate degree in rhetoric and composition. So then I began exploring that area and looking towards different programs and whether or not it would be a good fit for me. And so, yeah, I kind of came at it because I found an interest while I was doing my undergraduate degree and realized that in order to do what I wanted to do, I needed to get a graduate degree.
So for me, I always liked school, but was just terrible at it up until mid-high school. And so would have always liked to study philosophy, just didn't think it was a real possibility. And then about halfway through high school, really started to figure out how to use accommodations, really started to figure out like how to play to my strengths in academic setting. And then, so junior year of high school, I decided, okay, this is not something I'm just prohibited from doing. It's what I've really always enjoyed doing. And so between that and my interest in high school debate, ended up deciding that if I can, I want to get a PhD in philosophy because I want to teach that for the rest of my life.
For me, I've always loved looking at research and answering questions. I started off answering questions about intertidal zones, kind of tide pools right there at the coast on the ocean. And I've had several different ideas, from tide pools to neurons and zebrafish to rats. And so it's always been kind of a matter of like, I love studying, but what am I going to study? And finally, I just chose the topic for grad school that I come back from the bars at 2 a.m. when I was an undergrad, and what are the papers I read? And I just took that stack of papers and emailed all the professors in that stack. So that I really chose it by topic, and just kind of what I did in my spare time.
So Sarah, wait, did you say that you were in the OAS department?
Wait, for what?
You're talking about tide pools.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have an undergrad in biology from Humboldt State.
When you were introducing yourself, the internet kind of cut out for me a little bit, so I didn't hear it.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I'm in the Department of Psychology at the Florida
Okay.
Center for Reading Research.
Yeah, for me, coming to graduate school, I had taken most of my 20s off, actually, and my undergrad was in music, which is a totally different realm from policy. And I bounced around jobs as a teacher. I worked for a church. I was doing all these different things, trying to find what I enjoyed and what I felt passionate about. And then I stumbled into political activism. And there was just this perfect confluence of things, and I was pretty. It was really interesting for me because I was not casting my net far and wide. I live here in Tallahassee, and so I applied at Florida State, knowing, okay, well, if Florida State doesn't accept me, I'm not going to grad school. But the decision to go to grad school has been one of the most fulfilling things that I've undertaken. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks for sharing, y'all. So I'm curious, when you first applied to grad school, or when you first kind of jumped into graduate work beyond your first degree, what do you feel like you were most confident about, and then what do you feel like you had initial worries about?
For me, I actually think that grad school is much easier for people with, well, I have ADHD, so I don't know how it is for other disabilities, but at least my experience is that there's less learning in grad school, and it's more about, at least in biology, it's more about research and fine-tuning what you already know. So undergraduate, at least when you're getting a biology degree, it's more of like you're just kind of, they throw you into an ocean of knowledge, and then you're just kind of scrambling, trying not to drown. And then grad school is like you get on the island, and then you can like start to build things finally. So I mean, don't get me wrong, it's definitely still challenging. I have a homework assignment due tomorrow at 11 a.m. And I guess because of this whole coronavirus thing, I've kind of been putting it off, but it's definitely difficult, but it's not really, there's a difference between being difficult because of my disability, and there's difficult because it's just a hard topic, if that makes sense. But I can't speak to like other, what do you guys think?
Well, what I would say is that I found it very different from your experience. Again, I'm in the English department, so in the humanities. And for me, my undergraduate degree was in English literature. And so even though those degrees, rhetoric and composition and English literature, are in the same department, they're very, very different. And so I felt like I spent most of my early years in my graduate career just trying to learn as much as I could and making that transition. So for me, it was a very intense learning experience where a lot of research and new ideas were being presented to me that I had to navigate and learn about. And I think something that a lot of my peers experienced with me was feeling like overwhelmed by it all, and how much we needed to know and how much we didn't know at the time. So yeah, so a little bit different.
I would imagine it's very different when you actually switch subject areas.
Yeah, I had a hard time with that, trying to kind of get up to speed on all of the literature, especially because not everything was accessible. So like the articles would be handed by print, or, you know, just the general accessibility issues you would have with dyslexia. But it's kind of amazing that even people that study dyslexia, sometimes like it's not second nature to automatically email an electronic version ahead of time. No, you ahead of time, you print it out and give it to me. It's like very helpful. So that things like that were kind of my biggest struggle. And then the writing, oh my gosh, I did not realize how behind my writing skills were. Like I had the ideas, but to actually get it on the paper, it was bad. So I would recommend, if you're having trouble with that, I literally sat down one day and I told my advisor, like, could it be that you're not hearing my ideas because there's like a fog of spelling and grammar mistakes in the way of that? And so we worked with the Writing Center to get that cleared up, and I still do. So that was probably the most challenging part for me.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So my experience was somewhat similar to Sarah's in that I was fairly confident in my ability to think about philosophy. Like I was perfectly competent at philosophical conversations. I did study philosophy all through undergrad, so I was not switching disciplines at all, but was very concerned about those aspects of professionalization, which were sort of unique to grad school. In particular, the requirement to do philosophy in the original languages. So in undergrad, there was no expectation that I would know German or Latin or Greek. But in grad school, if I wanted to study those philosophers, I would need to do it in the original language if I was going to do graduate level work. And I just sort of knew that was not a possibility after continually failing to pass my language classes in undergrad. Similarly, writing was just a nightmare. Like in undergrad, I would like convince professors that, oh, it's an upper level class. You should let me take a oral examination on this material or things like that. But once you got to grad school, I actually did need to learn how to publish papers. And that meant I really needed to find a support network. For me, I resolved that by making really good friends who are much better writers than me, and maybe slightly worse at philosophy. So I was able to trade them philosophic edits for writing edits. And that's made life a lot easier. The thing that helps, right, so I was really worried about both these challenges, is you have a lot more freedom in grad school once you get to the actual PhD stage for what it is exactly you're going to study. So I knew I couldn't learn German, I knew I couldn't learn Greek, but I also knew I didn't have to study Kant or Plato for my dissertation. And so I was able to pick philosophers who were engaged in entirely English tradition in order to be able to not have that be an obstacle for professionalization purposes.
Yeah, I have ADHD as well, and my biggest concern going in, and my biggest concern just in my day-to-day life, is always time management. I have a pretty big case of time blindness. I'm really bad at understanding how.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, trying to figure out how much time I'm going to need to finish a specific project, and it's just before I know it, you know, I have a paper at 11 o'clock the next day and I'm just out. So the thing that switching disciplines, I was really expecting to have more of a challenge, but I found that was something that my disability really became an advantage, because I was able to kind of harness my hyper focus and my excitement for something new, and dig into being, you know, a harder worker than the rest of the class. Even if my timing was sometimes off. And of course, huge pandemics really don't help with your time management either.
They're so distracting. I had to get off social media because I was checking it like every 5 minutes. What's the next question, I think?
Yeah. So I'm curious, now that you all are in grad school, what do you feel like are some of the, and some of you have already shared this, but what do you feel like you succeed at uh, because of your disability, because of your different skills and strengths and whatnot? And what are some things that you feel like are significant challenges that you still work through on a daily basis?
Oh gosh, ADHD is a strength. I would say that it mostly just comes down to, well, part of it is what Matt is saying, that we have to work harder to get where we are. So, you know, when your PhD committee says you have to do a butt ton of work, you're like, how is that any different? But I think the biggest advantage is that in any science, or I'm sure any scholarly pursuit, that it's really valuable to think differently about things any way you can. And it helps me as a TA too, because like a lot of TAs don't really know what to do when they have like a disability student. And I'm like, here, go on this website, go with the OAS, and they'll tell you what to do. And I mean, as TAs, we're not allowed to know what their disability is, but I don't really need to know. I just need to know whether I mean, I don't really need to know. I just need to know their accommodations.
There are a couple of benefits that I found. Less I find for the ADHD, maybe some of the sort of, sometimes I can get really focused on projects. My dyslexia, though, I found to be more beneficial. First, just because since I was already in the habit of listening to things because I couldn't really read them, it actually means I'm able to be doing philosophy or like catching up on readings when other people wouldn't be able to, because I can be like listening to things as I walk across campus and actually process them, because that's just how I've always learned how to read academic articles. And so I know quite a few of my friends who are sort of jealous of my ability to get through piles of papers just because I get to listen to them rather than having to sit down and read them. Then there's the more cheatery ways where it kind of helps me, which is there's a area of philosophy called philosophy of disability, and it just significantly increases my credibility when I try to engage in that discipline by being dyslexic, and just not particularly shy on, you know, playing off that. And similarly, I think like when I'm on the job market, it actually will be like, it'll be the one time where it actually is valuable, because there are departments who would like the ability to have a philosopher who can talk to students through the accommodation process and has had experience working with the disability resources on campus. Because very few philosophers have learning disabilities of any sort. And anything that sets you apart on your application material is a good thing in a world where there are no academic jobs.
Yeah, well, they also may not have been diagnosed either.
So I'll jump into when I first, I have a couple different disabilities. One of them is anxiety with panic symptoms, and also ADHD as well. For me, the anxiety didn't really become a part of my life until I was finishing up my undergraduate degree. And so I didn't really figure out how to manage it until I was a graduate student. So it was very difficult trying to complete coursework and not being able to sleep because of anxiety and panic attacks. But I was able to find a routine that helped me mitigate some of my symptoms through like medication and through seeking counseling services for the anxiety aspect of it. And as I went through like those kind of coping techniques that I learned to manage my anxiety, it helps me manage the overwhelming amount of work that graduate studies comes with. I always tell my students that graduate programs are like, in my experience, 10 times harder than an undergraduate degree. So there's a lot more rigor that's expected of you. So, you know, I went in for like counseling because of anxiety, but it really helped me have a healthy mindset throughout the graduate program. With me and my ADHD, what I found is that I had to learn different coping strategies throughout my education career, and I'm really bad at like time management too. So one of the things that I became really good at was creating task lists and to-do lists and breaking things up into small chunks and giving myself time to accomplish those chunks. So it did help me organize a lot of my graduate career, and and figuring out, and after navigating this graduate plus the disabilities, I think it turned out to be an asset.
Yeah, my biggest challenge, and everything's right. I mean, it is just a huge increase in coursework. The difference between an undergrad, 20, 30 pages of reading a week to 200, 300 pages of reading a week. It's a huge increase, and time management is a huge part of that. But for me, my biggest challenge has been timed writing in the classroom and the seminar settings. And I don't know if that's something that is frequent across all graduate disciplines, but at least in the political science realm, it's something that I come across a lot. And it's something that I do well on time tests, but I don't do well on time writing, because it takes me longer to figure out how to connect one idea to the next. And that's been my biggest challenge. Yes.
Yeah, I don't have anything. I mean, everything I was going to say is basically, everybody's already said it. The only thing I learned in undergrad that I got really good at and benefited me in grad school is like looking at the university as a whole and what all the resources and different entities like that you can benefit from, the Career Center, the Writing Center. I was just used to going around campus and using a lot of campus facilities for my undergrad. And so that was really beneficial to hit the ground running.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing that. I think it's really important for us to recognize that students with disabilities, they exist in graduate school, and that it's not just about the difficulties that are faced from graduate school, but that graduate school is possible because it allows you to think through things from a different manner. It allows you to challenge norms. It allows you to challenge those things that graduate school and professional schools are all about. And so I think that's a really important point that you all have very vividly shared with this time and whatnot. So I'm curious, did any of you apply for accommodations through an entrance exam, like GRE, MCAT, Lsat, anything of that nature? And if you did, what did that look like?
For me, I literally just used the same results. So when I got accommodations, well, when I was really little, and then right before high school, and then my senior year of high school, I got a psychological assessment, and I was able to use those results to apply for GRE extended time for my undergraduate and all my graduate courses. So I guess maybe it depends on, I don't know because I haven't been tested since I was like 18. I don't know about you guys.
I mean, mine was an extensive process actually, because I realized my paperwork was too old. And so then and my parents couldn't fund me to get retested. So I had to beg the school to retest me. Finally got that done. And then my accommodations didn't get approved for the GRE on the first time. And so I heard from somebody else that they're like, oh, you need to get letters from your instructors saying that you actually used the accommodations that you're requesting, in the classroom and for assessments. So I did that. It was probably the worst part about the whole grad school experience was applying. And that not only that delayed signing up for the GRE because I had to get accommodations first before I could do the timing. It sucked.
It's weird that they asked you to have like letters from your professor. I didn't.
I mean, they didn't ask, but just somebody who was successful in the process said, if you want to ask for a non-standard accommodation, because there's standard accommodations and non-standard accommodations, then you're going to have more luck if you have documentation showing you actually use those accommodations in the same type of setting as the exam.
So somebody in the chat asked about medicals, the MCAT, and my brother is actually in medical school, and he has ADHD too, but unfortunately, he couldn't get extended time on the MCAT because he went to school and he went to college. He went to Sewanee, which is in Tennessee, and Tennessee has different laws about extended time where you have to be it has to be like a certain threshold on the result on the results of the exam. And I tried to convince him to go to another college, but he didn't listen to me. And then for MCAT, you're not allowed to apply for accommodations unless you use them as an undergraduate, no matter what the circumstances are. He was like, look, Tennessee is known for having like the worst disability laws when it comes to these things. And they didn't care. So this is, if you guys have, well, you guys are all OAS, so I think you guys are all registered. But if you're not, you need to get registered now because they're going to be looking at that.
It was actually my decision to not go for accommodations in the GRE that made me decide to apply for them when I got here. That's when I really ran into the timed writing thing. I mean, I just squeaked by on that. The rest of the test I did great, but I got the minimum score I needed to get accepted into the program. And that's when I was like, oh man, that was entirely too close for comfort. And that's when I came to see Spencer and started to apply for accommodations.
So what I'll share is, I think the important thing to note is that your experience might be different based off of which test you applied for, you know, which tests you were trying to take, and previous experiences with your disability and getting accommodations. Important thing to note is that never, ever, ever be discouraged in that process. And so I think Sarah brought up, I believe it was Sarah brought up a really good point about just being persistent about it. And it is a unfortunate reality that a lot of people don't understand that persistence, and that sometimes it takes and requires asking 5, 6, an exhausting amount of times for something to actually be done. But that persistence is really important, and know that our office is here to help you with that, and that if there is a test that we normally don't write something for, but you really feel like a support letter is going to help in that case, then we will write that support letter, because ultimately it comes down to getting you what you feel like you need, and doing as much as our office can to help you with that. So I wanted to, before we wrap everything up, and ask one last predetermined question from the panel, I did want to take a little bit of opportunity for maybe just a small amount of time. So if any of you have any specific questions, so if you have a interest area that you're going into, or something that you're really dying to ask, please feel free to, this is that time to ask those questions. So if you want to jump in on if you want to unmute, if you want to share information, you know, about your process and what that's looked like. If you want to ask a question, now's your time to do that. So. Okay, well, with that said, I know sometimes it takes a little bit of time for people to think and whatnot, and maybe you're just getting started, and hopefully this information is giving you a little bit to chew on and to think about in that graduate school process. So I wanted to ask one last question for the panel. So if you had one particular piece of advice, or you had any parting wisdom, something of that nature, that you really would like to share with folks about graduate school, using accommodations in graduate school, anything of that nature, what would that piece of advice be?
For me, it would be really go to grad school because you love something and you love the topic. And, don't go just to have fancy letters behind your name. That's kind of meaningless and you're going to be miserable, in my opinion. Because I was offered good opportunities in stem cell biology, but did I love it enough to really be successful? No, I didn't. I chose, without regrets, the more riskier opportunity, but what I was interested in at 2 a.m. when I got back from the bars. So that's kind of just follow your passion is what I would say.
Something I don't think I had a great sense of till grad school was how much people are generally just inclined to want to try to help you if you reach out, absent a sort of institutional structure, if you're willing to do that. So, for instance, the difference between grad school and undergrad for me was in grad school, I have a lot more self-directed readings, which I would need to get digital copies of. And then I very quickly found out that, like, between one of my professors and myself, I could just email most recent philosophers who publish books and be like, hi, can I just get a digital copy of the book? I know your publisher doesn't want you to do so, but just like approved. And they like always send it to me. They're just like perfectly happy to do so when I express that I need a digital copy. And so I have increasingly found that as your sort of studies become more individualized, what assistance you need becomes more individualized, but also the sort of network that you have as a graduate student is often, because people see you more as a colleague, and so it's often much easier to ask what would otherwise seem like an impertinent request, and people are totally fine with it.
I think, wasn't there there's a question in the chat. Do you think you've been successful in your undergraduate experience without accommodations? No. But as far as the advice, I would say, that the biggest thing is the relationship with the professor, that your professor knows your accommodations and that you feel like you feel safe talking to them about it.
I'll answer the chat question too. I definitely underachieved in my undergraduate without accommodations. I know that I could, in retrospect, have done a lot better. As for parting words, I want to second the relationships with your professors. It's just the biggest thing. But something that has really helped me is, especially in choosing my coursework, is reaching out to the professors in advance and asking for the syllabus like the second the schedule drops. Most of them have it available. And so for me, I get the syllabus from these classes and I use them to help decide what's going on. But also I load them into whatever my productivity software of the semester is. I change around a lot, but right now I like Trello, so that I have a chance to lay eyes on every single requirement of the class before we go into it. And the syllabus changes, but it gives me just kind of this really nice looming sense of dread about the things that need to happen in these courses and my ability to prepare for them. That's been really essential for me.
So I'll answer the chat question and offer some advice too. I did most of my higher education without accommodations. And one of the things that I really needed accommodations for, which didn't become And I think operating without accommodations definitely made things more difficult. And I finally registered for accommodations because one of the things that I struggled the most with, timed writing and memorization, came to a head in my degree because I had to take preliminary examinations on a huge reading list, and I had to have everything memorized and be able to spend hours locked in a room responding to preset questions that I had no idea what we're going to be on and what kind of readings I would need to draw on. And I knew that with my disabilities, that wasn't going to be possible in the format that the test had. It was an inaccessible format for me. So if I hadn't registered for accommodations and had that test augmented for me, I definitely could not have finished my degree, and I wouldn't be here having finished it. In terms of advice, I would say that it's really important that once you've gotten accepted into a graduate program to talk with some of the current graduate students. They're going to give you a lot of truthful insight into the program, hopefully, and you'll get a good sense of whether or not the culture there is something that you want to be a part of. Oftentimes we talk about how important it is to be surrounded by professors that share your research interest, and that's really valuable too. But you also want to be in an environment that is going to value you as an individual and help you succeed. So yeah, I would say that it's really important to kind of get some insider knowledge on that program to see whether or not you'll be able to succeed in it.
Well, with that said, if any of you all have any last thoughts for the panel, or if any of the panelists have any last thoughts, any words of encouragement, anything else you'd like to offer, now's the time.
I guess I would say don't be discouraged, because I think I can honestly say this is the best time to be in college and have a disability. This is like the best time in human history for that. Except maybe for like ancient Greece, where you didn't have, all you did was like show up for class and just listen to Socrates talk. Except for that, but.
Well, and with that said, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So I want to thank our panelists for taking some time out. I know, especially now, especially those that have papers due tomorrow at 11 a.m., taking an hour out the day before might be a challenge in some cases. So thank you to all of the panelists that took so much time today to help us to understand just get a glimpse of what the experience might be like for graduate school. I think the important thing as a takeaway from here is it's really important for you to understand that as students with disabilities, you have the opportunity and you have the skills to go to graduate school, and that sometimes it's about finding right fit. Sometimes it's about finding what's going to work for you best and using the tools and resources like the Office of Accessibility Services and like the Career Center to help you achieve that a little bit. And so I'm quickly hand it over to Emily because Emily wants to give a quick plug for their grad student services.
Thanks, Spencer. So for all of the grad panelists, you may already receive newsletters from Megan Crow, but just wanted to give a plug. So the Career Center has a career liaison who works specifically with graduate students. And for those who are thinking about graduate school at FSU, Just know that once you get into graduate school, we still have services for you all and work really hard to support our graduate students, because we know that your career development can look a little bit different. So just wanted to give a little shout out that we've got a lot of help for you all too.
So with that said, I will also go ahead and give a quick plug. So towards the end of this semester, we will be unveiling some new opportunities that you all will have through our office. So we are partnering with the Career Center to promote graduate school and to really kind of hone this experience of prepping for graduate school with your specific needs in mind, considering your disability and whatnot. And so one thing that we're looking at and we're hoping to announce fairly soon is an opportunity for some sort of like mentor program and opportunity to get one-on-one or smaller assistance and connections that are really important for that grad school prep process. So keep an eye out for that. If you have not had the chance to fill out our interest survey in that, please feel free to email me, and I can always email you the link as well for that. And just as a reminder, we will post this recording and all of the resources up on our webpage under the programs and events page so that you can access this and continue to benefit from this. So again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Emily, Sarah, Marshall, Ellen, Matt, and Joseph on taking that small amount of time out to really give students the opportunity to think about this. So thank you all. I'm also going to plug our next program, which is this Friday, and it's on testing and accommodations and what that looks like now with online classes. So this is going to be a real good opportunity for you to ask all the questions that you have about that. So please feel free to join us at 1 p.m. That day. And if you need that information, we've sent it out. You can always email me to get it again. So, all right. Thanks, y'all.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.